Good evening and welcome to Lessons in Leadership. This is episode number 4, sponsored by the Mark Pettipaw Group, because when you can't find a sponsor, do it with your own company. This evening's guest is someone that I'm very, very pleased to have on the podcast to share his story. I have a personal connection to Bob, as I reported to the guy for quite a while, and here we are over a decade later and still stay in touch, and still someone I admire, and I think a lot of you can learn from his story. So I'd like to prompt him on a little bit of that, and hopefully he'll inspire you as he's inspired me through my career. So a little bit about Bob Hunter. And then I'll have Bob fill in the gaps here. So Bob, senior executive at Skydome, and then a senior executive at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. He was the chief facilities and live entertainment officer at the time I was there. Bob has been, if I'm not mistaken, chair at IAAM, and so the facility management school in West Virginia that I had the pleasure to go to. Bob's been involved in that. Most recently, Bob's been and is the CEO of the Toronto Wolfpack and working on a new venture. But I'll have Bob explain a little further what he's working on now. But Bob, have I missed any of the major points in your introduction?
No, I just maybe just one, Mark, which isn't common knowledge, and that is for 4 years I stepped out of the sports and facilities business and ran a corporate real estate / facility management company for owned by two or three big Canadian companies. And that was truly corporate Canada dealing. And I was selling a lot, which was actually a great training ground for me from a sales and marketing standpoint. But that was the only part of my career, I think, where I wasn't in touch with sports. So.
And here I thought I knew you, and I missed that big part.
There you go.
Bob, you're kind of the, and you're a very modest person, so I'll brag for you a little bit here. You're kind of the facilities guy in North America, yet you have so much more that you excel at. But that reputation of, if you got a major facility and you want to know how to run it, Bob Hunter's the guy to talk to. I've been able to watch it up front, but I think what people underestimate is your leadership skills, and those are the things that have influenced me. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. Bob, when I was mentioning we were at MLSE, you were my boss. I learned a lot from you coming into that organization, as a retail guy and not really knowing anything else. So both from a functional perspective, but watching you lead other people. So tell me a little bit about, what you think is your transferable skill set as a leader. You've done so many things in your career. You've influenced so many people. How come? What's the piece that has allowed you to be successful across multiple organizations?
Mark, it's surround yourself with great people, number one, and then let those people do their jobs and let them really have the autonomy, the empowerment, and the authority to both function and lead themselves and be a quiet observer on the sidelines and provide guidance when you see guidance is needed, provide direction when you think direction is needed. But at the end of the day, surround yourself with great people and don't surround yourself with people that are like you. You don't need a whole bunch of Bob Hunters in the same organization. You need a variety of opposing opinions, a variety of opposing thoughts, creativity, and that comes in the different personalities that you surround yourself with.
Yeah, to complement your skills, to build a stronger team.
Well, your strengths and your weaknesses.
Yeah.
Go find people that can support your weaknesses. And I think I take great pride. I think I worked with some amazing people that brought so much to the table.
Awesome. Bob, when I was at MLSE and I was in consumer products, I think quickly I realized one day I wanted your job. And we joked about that. And unfortunately for you at times, I think the fact that you were my boss, I wasn't the easiest person to manage because I always wanted more and I wanted it now. But you did a really good job of reading into who I was as a person and getting me to slow that down while not, filtering out my desire to grow. And so you kind of put me on a track to learn to be able to get that opportunity at BMO Field. How do you help someone go to that next level? So you took a guy who was a retail background, district manager guy, running consumer products, and you put me in a role where I had the ability to open up a stadium with your guidance, hands-on guidance, or I wouldn't have got there, introducing me to the PCLs of the world, FF&E experience, project management, live events, food and beverage. Like, how did you do that with me as an example?
Well, again, I think, and take it for what it is worth, Mr. Pettipaw, but honestly, it's, you see the talent and you see the opportunity. And you know that, and I knew very quickly that retail and consumer products at MLSE, although a big department that we wanted to grow aggressively over time, was not going to be enough to keep you there. And so therefore we had to create a career path that got you that exposure. I mean, there was a 50-50 risk that you were going to fail, but we honestly believe that the risk was well worth the opportunity for success. And so when you see young talent, you have to take it upon yourself to manage that growth and development. People, and I applaud you because you were pretty vocal about wanting to grow, but there are many that aren't. And so you've got to manage that, massage it, and bring some of those people forward because you believe that there are opportunities there that, again, are you going to strengthen my organization? So, and as I say, when it's 50-50, there are 2 or 3 cases, which I know that promotions of people into different areas, totally out of their comfort level, that didn't work. And those, you probably know who they are, but they didn't work. And you know what? But we tried it. So, you know, you talk about failures. Well, it was I would call it an experiment, and it didn't quite work out the way we wanted it to.
You were always, you know, Bob, I just love what you said there because, you know, I'm becoming a little more self-aware as I get older. And I know I can be difficult to manage, and I certainly was at that time, but I think where you and I connected was, I never sensed you threatened by that. I always sensed you saying, okay, you know, without saying the words, you were demonstrating the behavior that said, the guy's got a little bit of talent. Let's see if we can keep him. Let's stretch him. You know, one of the criticisms I received by a leader, and it was valid, and they literally sat me down and told me, it was like, you always seem to have one foot out the door because that next growth opportunity isn't there for you. And so, you know, I feel this pressure to find the fit for you, you're going to leave. And the reality was, yep, that was the case. I did because I wanted to grow, and you were never threatened by that. And I give you like full kudos for identifying that in me, where most leaders wouldn't. They'd be threatened by it. So why invest in someone who may be leaving?
But and it's a very good question, and it's a very, very simple answer, because I think, and even till today, and again, take it as a compliment, I knew that at some point you'd come back to sports. Like that seemed to be your passion and whatever. And you needed to get outside of that realm to taste the world, whatever you wanted, and learn other types of businesses and learn other types of disciplines, so that you'd be even more valuable to the MLSEs of the world when you did come back. And unfortunately, sequence of events just didn't present itself the way it could have. But I honestly believed, and you know, we remain friends forever, is that I honestly believe at some point you would be back.
And that may be with the Montreal Canadiens, but what do you do, right, Bob?
Well, we will be looking for a new coach and general manager soon. So yeah.
Well, let's not go there. We're still there right now. We're still in the hunt. Yeah, and again, I think that's sage advice. Like, I find a lot of leaders, they get a little threatened by the fact that you know, they might put in the work of development and the person may leave. And I think what you saw 15, well, maybe 15, no, maybe it's, well, close to 15 years ago now that I do the math, is that sure, that was always a risk, but wasn't your job as a leader to develop me and see if that opportunity could exist inside of the organization? And today's workforce, you know, some of the biggest criticism the young workforce gets is they want everything tomorrow. And I think that's sage advice. You need to calm down and do the learning. But I think the leadership challenge is, well, I'm going to lose people anyways. What am I doing to develop them while they're here So
Yeah.
we're better, and isn't that my responsibility as a leader? And kudos for you for doing that over a decade ago, because I know I wasn't an easy person to manage.
Well, and again, lessons learned is that you manage every person individually. There is no cookie cutter format. There's no leadership book that's been written that ever could tell you the standard leadership styles that will be successful across the entire board, because every person is different.
Awesome. Can I let's maybe shift to you as a leader and your style. And what I mean by that, Bob, objectively sitting on the outside, I think what a lot of people would say about you differently than some of the other senior leaders in sports and entertainment is you have more of a calming demeanor and nature. I'll never forget, you were at MLS All-Star, I think, with Vince at the time, and I was at BMO running the Under-20 World Cup, and we had the Chile versus Argentina brawl on the bus, and I had gotten pepper sprayed in the middle of all this chaos, and players were being taken to Station 14, and reports were being filed, and was Chile going to get kicked out or not? And I literally was under my desk in the fetal position. Okay, maybe not literally, but here I am as a rookie GM. And it took a conversation with you in Houston to calm me down and address the situation that was becoming an international event. Like, the Prime Minister of Chile was demanding an apology from the Prime Minister of Canada. And long story short, where does that come from? Like, where does your ability to manage that pressure and keep everybody calm come from as a leader?
Well, I think, a lot of scars on the career from major events. I think being very early in entertainment taught me that, boy, oh boy, if you're not calm, no one else is going to be. And so, and especially those that are standing behind you and looking to you for that leadership and that guidance. So, I've had my moments, don't get me wrong. I've had very few, or I've had many of those moments, but I think again, at the end of the day, it's once you've had some of those experiences, like everything, it just teaches you how to handle the next one. So add up all those bits and pieces that you learned in all those different experiences, try to culminate it into one approach and whatever. And I think, quite honestly, I get very excited, but I get very excited inside. And I try not to relay that and bring it out in the live situation. And I think people would say that it does have a calming effect. It does help. And yeah, we've all been through some of those rather hairy moments. So
yeah. So if I was to summarize for the 175 listeners so far that have downloaded the podcast, try and let the outside appearance be one of calming nature, address what's going on inside, but realize the whole way that this is just another experience in your toolkit, and that you're going to have to go through a few of those to get to that point where you can be that calming figure.
Oh, it has. And I think, again, I'm going through another one right now as it relates to the rugby team. And it's very trying, it's very stressful, but at the end of the day, people have said to me, how can you stay so calm? Well, because we need that to get through this thing, right? So
yeah. Richard spoke to that as well, his ability to understand that everyone was always watching, and I was bugging him about, well, I don't think I was bugging him, but I was probing him on the whole fire Richard Petty thing. And like going into work every day and there'd be planes flying over downtown with them. And like, how did you do it? And he goes, listen, that beat me up. I did not feel good. I did go through a point of like feeling really bad about it, but I never showed that, because then what happens? Everybody else jumps on and everyone feels that pressure. And the senior leaders like yourself that do it well, and Richard, it's a conscious effort is what I'm understanding.
I appreciate that. And again, it does come from a bunch of scars that I
love the scars reference.
You've gained over time, and it gets easier the more you've been through it. So
if I could ask you on a personal front, Bob, and share where you'd like, when I try and explain my leadership DNA that is ever evolving and falling down and getting up and learning from my mistakes, there's two things in my life. My mom was always the life of the party, make sure everybody else is taken care of first, try and keep them smiling. And my dad was the disciplinarian, military, strategic guy. And I look at my career and I go, where I've tried to get better is on my dad's side, because I've kind of always, you would know this, naturally been my mom's side of, hey, let's all have some fun while we're doing this. But my dad, with the discipline on strategic planning as a leader and developing others, I'm really focusing on that skill set. Where does yours come from, whether it's parents, family, friends? Is there a combining link that shows up in who you are as a leader because you've learned it from personal influences in your life? And who would you say those would be?
I think similar to what you're describing. I mean, my parents had a very significant influence on me. My mother being a very, very calm, not quiet by any means, but very, very calm. I think many people know that I have 8 brothers and sisters. And so that bedlam, that mayhem of growing up and I being in the middle as fourth, I think there wasn't much that sort of startled you or got you going. And again, my father, as a major influence, was an extremely hard worker, both from a community standpoint and from just, he never stopped. And I think what he did was teach us all that, hard work does breed success. And I think that was one thing that, and I forget who it was that told me very early in my career, is the first thing you have to do is outwork your boss. Like, you got to work your boss, because otherwise you're just not going to get noticed. And so, that, and I was fortunate enough to probably have 2 or 3 mentors fairly early in my career, and then sort of mid-career, where I could, bounce my challenges off of and bounce my stress off of, that they would provide guidance. I may or may not have been able to have used it, but certainly it gave me direction to either try it or not go down that road. And and these were fairly senior people, and always would open the door to any sort of time that I needed, and that was very significant influence in my career. Because Richard, God, I worked for Richard for I think 16 years, and he is still my #1 leadership model. But there are things you can't go to your boss, and so yeah, and so I think family for sure, mentors for sure. You continue to learn no matter what, and adjust your style to the situation at hand. When I went into the Wolfpack, we had about 14 or 15 employees in Toronto, probably about the same amount in the UK. I don't think there's anyone in those employees that's over 27. So, I walk in there as a semi-retired sports executive, and I had to kind of gain the support and influence of that group, and it was a whole new leadership style. So.
Yeah, connectivity is one of your biggest strengths, right? And you've got to find a way, because ultimately the work gets done by the people on the front line, and you got to find a way to support them and connect with them. And you were always great at that. So good lesson there for people listening is, be aware of family influences on your style and what you've learned and those examples and behaviors growing up, and then look for some professional mentors. But also that theme of self-learning and evolving at all times is something that needs to continue to happen for anyone who wants to progress in leadership. And you've led by example on that front. Leading to that, as we've got about 20 minutes left, and I want to cover a few more subjects. IAAM. I always get mixed up if it was IAAM or IAVM or.
Now IAVM.
So now it's changed, but it was IAAM when I would have went to West Virginia, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you dedicated a lot of your personal time to that and to help others grow and develop. Talk a little bit about IAAM, what it was, and why you did it and why you were so passionate about it.
Well, I think very early in my career, and again, we just opened BC Place Stadium in Vancouver. My boss at the time, our CEO, encouraged me to become a member, because he said, "You're not coming from the industry, so you got a lot of catching up to do." Because I'll call it, I came from entertainment. very, very quickly saw the value, the openness, the anyone will help you whenever they can type attitude. And so I would say after 2 or 3 years of asking a million questions of a million people, I decided that I wanted to get involved. And so sat on committees, did whatever, got invited to teach at the school that you attended. I think I'm probably the longest standing instructor now at 27 years I've been going. And so it, like everything, it's, you want to give back, but I've said it every year after I come back from teaching is that I probably learned more than I ever taught. And that's keeping on top of what's going on, understanding the differences between the different type of venues, et cetera, et cetera. So IABM, I've served on way too many committees, been in a senior leadership role on the board a number of different times, run the school 2 or 3 times in those 27 years. And to this day, communicate with them on a regular basis. And because again, I don't think you ever stop learning. And you got to stay connected with that learning circle. So
I think there's some themes in there to be shared as well. If I summarize what you said, was you gravitated there first because it was an association you could get some learning in.
yeah.
And then you felt an obligation to give back by now coming in from a teaching position and a director position. And then how critical associations are in most industries to stay connected. And so if people aren't out there looking at their local industry associations to connect with those networks and learn from them, they should be. It's one of the things I learned another one of the things I learned from you was that when I went into home building, I made it a point to get really attached to the local associations, sit on committees, help with luncheons, speak at them, get to know the other builders. And although you're technically in a competitive environment, you're usually not competing directly, and there's much to learn from one another. And so I always try and stay connected to those because they're a great networking opportunity, great learning opportunity. And again, I see in your theme of just helping others and giving back, and that's obviously another example of what you've done. Let's talk about where you've really screwed up and sucked, Bob. Let's talk.
I thought you said we only had 20 minutes left.
Where, a really cool theme of like these guests and you being the third one about their failures. So Richard shared failing in high school and then going all the way to being a CEO at MLSC and now being a leader of the leadership symposium at University of Western, where he did eventually, Windsor, where he did eventually get his degree. Kate Burness's goal of being in the WNBA and getting cut at the university level after blowing her knee, but still knowing, hey, I'm going to get up. I still want to be associated with sports and pursuing her dream to be a sportscaster. Tell us about you. Any major fall downs that helped you grow?
Oh, no, I think I can think of some really, really bad events that we put on where other people said, I don't think we should do this. And I said, no, we're going to take the chance. And so doing a snow cross inside of an arena is one of my more notorious ones. Convincing Richard that we should guarantee Barnum and Bailey Circus in the middle of July in a very hot Toronto was another financial fiasco that to this day Richard reminds me of. But I think, just generally you make mistakes on people sometimes. You pick the wrong person for the wrong reason or what you think is the right reason. And that does cause you grief for 3 to 4 to 6 months, et cetera, et cetera. But I think generally it's a matter of, if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning. And so you just got to keep pushing. And I've said this to people that I'm working with at the moment. I said, don't worry about making mistakes, because that's how you learn and grow, and that's how an organization learns and grows. And so, yeah, I taught a course, actually. You'll recall, Mark, that MLSE was very focused on internal development and teaching. And I actually wrote and taught a course called The 10 Worst Mistakes I've Ever Made.
Oh, really?
And it was it was quite comical and was obviously very light in content. But it was kind of like, okay, I sat down and thought about it, and here are the worst mistakes I've ever made, and you just heard about a few of them. So.
It's funny, Bob. Again, another perfect example from the three guests of, learning from those mistakes and actually valuing them, right? And you do hear a lot about that. You'll hear a lot of, big speakers talk about that. But I think a lot of people would tell you, unfortunately, it's not the reality in a lot of workplaces. People are beat up when they make a mistake, and leaders are threatened by mistakes. What advice would you give that leader today who beats their people up every time they screw up? And what advice would you give that person who's taking that beating to learn from that bad leader? Like, how do we make that stop, that bullying leadership style?
Well, the bullying leadership style as the leader is something where they've got to learn and appreciate that style has very short-term results and has zero long-term results. And if you want to keep your best people, that style is never going to work long term. People can watch their peers or can take what they get from a brutal type leader in that situation, but only for so many times. Like, you can beat me up and I can recover from it, but I'm gonna be thinking, is this what I want to do long term? Is this guy or gal gonna be here long term? Are they the person that I'm supposed to be succeeding? Like, am I working hard to succeed them? Well, if that's the style that is successful in this company, I don't think I want to be even part of this company. And if you are the recipient, and I've said this many, many times, if you have no respect for leadership, or you don't see that leadership has a clear development plan or path for you as an individual, then I wouldn't hesitate in a minute. And I have many times recommended to people that they make that big move and go and get a company that you're more comfortable with. So.
Yeah, I think it's wise advice. One, for the leader, because the difference now versus 20 years ago is the workforce is expecting that now, and they're going to leave, and you're not going to acquire talent to generate the business result. So you better learn how to lead the right way, or it's going to not only hurt you financially, it's going to hurt you emotionally, because no one's going to want to be around you. And people are demanding that now. And then on the other side, for the person who's being led that way, yeah, at some point you do need to look elsewhere, and you do need to learn from the negative lesson, but move on. I've been lucky. I've worked for guys like you, ladies like Lisa, people like Richard, one or two bad leaders in a long career so far. But I did learn from those leaders of what I'm not going to do. And so it's wise advice.
I think we've all had them. And I know I had one in Vancouver at the time, and I just thought, well, I have zero respect for you. I left within 3 months of working under that person. So, now it's worked out, but it's all short-term thinking.
It goes back to those scars you were referring to, even from a leadership style. You go, okay, that one hurt. I've kind of, healed. I'm not going to get burnt again, and I'm not going to do it to someone else. Yeah. And so you learn and you add it to your toolkit as a leader. So it's all kind of coming together. Let me ask you this, Bob. I'd love for you to share with everyone kind of what you're working on now, both with rugby and then the new venture that you're working on as well at the same time. Could you share that with everybody? Because I think it's pretty cool and exciting for anyone listening.
Well, yeah, I'm with permission from our CEO, Michael Freesdale, my last year of MLSC, which was called a year and a half ago, I started consulting and worked for 2 firms in the US. So that is kind of ongoing, and I've continued to do that. A friend of mine who was involved with the Wolfpack from a financial standpoint approached me and said, we're very nervous about current management. Would you be willing to come in? And I said, well, I can come in on a half-time basis, but I do have other commitments. And then fortunately, like everything, it turned full-time within about a week. But it was exciting and enjoyable. And the financial model will be challenging from now till doomsday. When you're playing in a European league 11 of the 12 teams are in Europe. You've got exorbitant costs associated with fielding teams in the two countries, and we have training facilities in the UK, training facilities in Toronto. I love the game though. I love the brand. I love the fans. It's a great atmosphere on a Saturday afternoon at Lamport. But COVID, amongst many other things, it has put almost the death nail in the coffin. So it's just a matter of, we're trying to sell the team now. We've got a couple of potential buyers, one in the UK, one here. Both of them will keep it in Toronto. But just long term, there's got to be a different format or different contractual relationship with the league than there is today. So that decision will be in the next couple of weeks. Recently, as of almost 2 months ago.
Wait a second, is this breaking news on like the Lessons in Leadership podcast here, Bob? Like,
Mark,
did you save it for this?
I'm slipping it to you first. Slipping it to you. But yeah, so if you want to buy a rugby team, I'm sure that we can make an arrangement. So
just after I make this month's car payment, if there's anything left, I'll figure it out.
But very exciting. But 3 months ago, former peer of mine, Chris Overholt, who we worked together at MLSE, is now the CEO of what's called Overactive Media Group, and they are 100% esports. And they have two teams here in Toronto that play in 2 North American leagues, and then they have 2 in Europe, similarly play in 2 European leagues. I appreciated and understood esports, but I had no appreciation to this level of how it's exploding worldwide, continues to explode worldwide, probably started exploding 2 years ago, 3 years ago worldwide. Now, I don't sure that anyone's commercially figured it out how to make it work, but Chris and the company have hired me to design and build for them a dedicated esports arena, 7,000 to 10,000 seats. Would also serve home as many concerts as we could. I call it a theater versus an arena because it's not going to be oval shaped, it's not going to have ice, it's not going to be like basketball, et cetera, et cetera. It's esports and concerts. And I think of the size of the market, we'll definitely support it. And so we've got a lot of work to do in 6 months to figure out design and cost, and then the ownership group will decide whether they want to proceed with building it.
Wow, so another facility for Bob Hunter to build in the city of Toronto. You've done a few of those.
Yeah, I've screwed up a few things in Toronto.
You've done well on quite a few. That leads me to like my last kind of question before we do our 2 final sign-off questions that I always ask. One of the things you've done really well, Bob, is you're really good at relationship leadership. So when you don't have people that need to listen to you, they want to listen to you, they want to work with you, you get an understanding of what's important to them, like example, BMO Field in Toronto and multiple stakeholders being the City of Toronto, Exhibition Place, the province, the feds, because everybody played a part in that. How do you do that? How do you get so many people on board with competing interests? Can you share with maybe the audience of how you develop relationships and where your leadership style is on that front?
Well, I think simply put, and it goes through an entire organization, but from the janitor to the CEO, is I think you treat everyone exactly the same. And be it, and I say this with the kindest regard, be it the premier of the province or be it the aide that's 27 levels down, I think you treat them all exactly the same. And as we built those venues and had great partnerships with the City of Toronto, you need those people. So you bring honesty, integrity, transparency, and just a win-win for both sides approach. Because the win for your side as being the ultimate goal, again, will have short-term success, but will not have long-term success. And I can say proudly today that I'm dealing with some staff at Exhibition Place that I dealt with 20 years ago. And I think I have the same relationship 20 years later that I did then. And that is, I can get a whole bunch of things done that I know a lot of people can't get done just because I've always treated that individual with a lot of respect.
Yeah, and you've always gone for the win-win. I remember going when you were transitioning the operations of BMO more like to me, and I had to go in front of the board at Exhibition Place, and it's a completely different culture, a completely different environment than going to MCM or the board at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, because the end goals were different, right?
Yeah.
In a public entity versus a private entity. But you were always really respectful about teaching me that, so I didn't put my foot in my mouth. And I think that is where you get all those win-wins on those relationships, is understanding different cultures and what's important to different leaders.
Well, and appreciating what their objectives are. So
Yeah.
that it's not always going to work. I mean, way back when with the Blue Jays, when I worked with the Blue Jays, it was, we were the landlord and they were the tenant. Their objectives were a lot different than ours. So you've got to figure out how to marry those for success for both organizations.
On that note, I mean, we've shared a lot of your tips and tricks along this quick conversation. That's kind of gone on for almost 40 minutes now. Time flies when you're having fun. In the last 5 minutes or so, what are the words of wisdom you'd give to the up and coming Bob Hunter out there?
Listen and learn and never stop asking questions. And to an earlier comment, always sort of getting outside your comfort zone, feeling comfortable about making mistakes, and learn. I mean, there's education of leadership skills and there's experience in leadership skills. And it's a combination of both that you never, ever, in my opinion, you ever master, because you just have to keep pushing yourself.
Yeah, that's now that I'm in the world of starving consultants here, I can't believe people who call themselves experts on leadership. Because how do you ever become an expert in something that's constantly changing and where you always have a learning gap, whether it be education or experience? But yeah, like you can certainly be among the best at doing that. But it's a lifelong lesson. I recommend to a lot of people out there listening to this podcast, Simon Sinek all the time. And his latest thing is the infinite game. And it's just the whole concept that life is an ongoing lesson. And if you're getting into leadership to be perfect at it one day, do something else, because that's never going to happen. If you're getting into it because you want to impact others and continue to learn, then it's a great path for you.
Well, I use quickly as an example, last year at the school for IABM, and a woman who was in second year, I was teaching leadership in second year, and she came up to me, I'm guessing she was 32, 33. She said, Bob, she really, really enjoyed your class, but here's a bit of advice. She said, you're teaching to a 50 to 60-year-old or a 45-year-old or whatever one, and there's no demarcation, obviously. But she says, you're not teaching to the audience in that room anymore. So she said, I think you've got to update your materials. And as hurt and as humble as I was, I came back from that class this year and researched and rewrote my stuff. And so anyways, but that's learning, right?
Yeah, it's constant evolving and being aware of it, which is really important, that you need to be aware of it. And sometimes people are giving you those messages. Lee Piccoli, a guy I worked with at Fusion for 6 years, smart businessman. But I remember one thing that struck me, like, here's a guy who built a company after having been on the tools himself, and like built 10 homes a year, and then 50, and now 500, and he's in low rise and high rise and new divisions of the company. He said he goes to Harvard every year, and he's in this 9-year executive development course. I said, well, why'd you do it? And he said, because every year the company changes in volume. I'm now the CEO of a different company. I'm the CEO of a 20 million. Now I'm the CEO of a 50. And what does all that look like, right? And identifying those gaps. So I've always admired people who can look at that. I wanted to leave you with one thing, Bob, besides a thanks. I think what people don't do often enough in life is thank people and realize when they've been blessed and lucky to be around someone who's influenced their life. And you've always done that for me. I am sitting in the position I'm in today because of people like you that I've been lucky enough to learn from, and people like you that have invested not only in my career, but me as a person. You know, one of the things you've always done for me, Bob, is regularly go and have a beer and we catch up and we talk about life and career. And I learn every time we talk. And I don't think I'd be the dad or the leader I am today without some of the influences you've had on my life. So thank you.
Appreciate that very much. It's been my pleasure, and we're due for more beers.
Yeah, you are, besides a great leader, a great person. What we haven't done in years is golf. And I must tell you, I'm actually like now getting in the 80s. So I might be able to give you a run.
I'm up for that. I'm up for that.
80s with a couple mulligans, but let's not talk about that right now. Bob, it was great. Thanks for being on this call, and thanks for sharing your wisdom with everyone. You've had a tremendous impact on a lot of people, and keep it up.
My pleasure, Mark, and best of luck in your consulting practice. I cannot help but see success in your future.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Bob.